We have confirmed 9 Russian armored vehicles wiped out, 4 more heavily damaged, and a mechanized assault near Kromator, completely halted after multiple brutal waves. But this tactical disaster did not start with a massive clash. It started with a lone Russian BTR charging through open ground near Bodichi, its infantry riding fully exposed on top of the hull. They had steel armor underneath them, but that steel hull becomes a metal coffin the second an FPV drone strikes or an anti-tank mine detonates underneath. As a result, what was meant to shield infantry has become a deadly gamble. From Berdichi to Tourette and onward to Kramatorsk, this nightmare keeps repeating. Moscow is throwing armor, mechanized assets, and heavy plating into the meat grinder to maintain offensive pressure. But Ukrainian forces are weaponizing UAVs, Bradley fighting vehicles, and elite commando raids into a lethal layered defense. So why do these mechanized columns keep blindly charging into drone-monitored kill zones? And what does this tell us about the collapse of Moscow's broader strategy? Let us break down the battlefield telemetry. Following the fall of Avdiivka, Russia did not pause operations. They aggressively pushed further west toward Berdichi, exploiting the newly opened axis of advance. Their objective was not just consolidation. They wanted to deny Ukraine any breathing room, preventing them from reorganizing lines, moving fresh reserves, or fortifying new defensive positions. This Russian doctrine was brutal and highly exposed. Rather than deploying massive armored columns, commanders relied on small, fast assault squads packed onto BTR personnel carriers. These elements could cover ground far quicker than dismounted infantry, hit the drop-off zone, and immediately disperse into tree lines, ruins, or nearby buildings. If they survived the gauntlet, those ruins served as launch pads for the next wave. Tactically, it made sense to keep momentum rolling after Avdiivka. ABTR delivers troops closer to the zero line than soft-skinned trucks, crossing contested fields before heavy Ukrainian artillery can zero in on them. Yet, that rapid transit invites its own deadly risks. With Ukrainian reconnaissance drones scanning the sector, every advance is mapped, tracked, and countered instantly. Overhead, Ukrainian eyes in the sky monitor every single vector leading to Berdichi. Any vehicle entering the kill zone is targeted long before troops can dismount. The most telling aspect of these attacks is how the infantry actually rides. Troopers sit clustered on top of the hull rather than inside the armored bay. That visual captures the brutal reality of modern combat. The armor has utility for speed and transport, but the men on the ground clearly do not trust its defensive capability. Sure, riding inside protects you from small arms fire and stray shrapnel. However, that cramped metal box instantly becomes a furnace if they detonate an anti-tank mine or get hit by a precision kamikaze drone. An internal blast or secondary ammunition fire leaves the crew with zero chance of escaping alive. Naturally, riding exterior decks carries massive hazards. Troops are fully exposed to airburst shrapnel, snipers, drone targeting, and heavy machine gun ambushes. But it offers a split-second window to bail if the vehicle hits a mine or gets targeted by drones. This is not tactical confidence. It is a choice between 2 bad deaths. This paradox dooms the assault before the first shot is even fired. While Moscow relies on mechanized transport to sustain the Berdichi offensive, their troop-carrying tactics prove that passive armor alone is no longer viable. The armored carrier has ceased to be a reliable shield. It is a giant target. The moment it slows near the front line, the entire squad is compromised. This BTR reached its drop zone with one mission: deploy the infantry close to Ukrainian trenches, execute a rapid dismount, and secure those critical initial moments under fire. In mechanized doctrine, that vehicle represents mobile cover, not just logistics. It is the only kinetic shield protecting troops as they cross open terrain to initiate the assault. But once the boots hit the dirt, the plan unravels. The personnel carrier fails to stay and provide heavy fire support. It immediately turns back along the hot route, leaving the squad isolated right in front of Ukrainian lines, without their primary heavy weapon. Now, they are completely cut off and exposed. A tiny, isolated element fighting to survive before the sector can even be secured. The second that armor lost its momentum, the trap sprung. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone dove in from the rear, scoring a direct hit on the engine bay. This area is highly vulnerable, where thin armor, troop doors, and critical engine components are easily punctured by shaped charges. A single hit on that sector does not need to obliterate the armor instantly. Our goal is to immobilize it, blind the crew, or force the driver to make a fatal error. Immediately after, a second FPV strike drone hammered the target. This was no random hit on a target of opportunity. It was a highly coordinated effort to eliminate that armored vehicle the moment the enemy infantry dismounted. The second that BTR began brewing up, its combat utility died. It was no longer a transport, a fire asset, or an escape route. Focus on this, our forces did not even have to target the enemy infantry first. By killing the vehicle, Ukrainian drone teams severed the entire offensive architecture. That BTR linked their advance, fire support, and retreat options. When that connection vaporized, those hostile ground troops lost far more than just a piece of hardware. They lost the operational anchor keeping them alive. This is the raw, tactical leverage FPV drones bring to close combat. These assets strike in that critical split-second window when armor is bogged down, exposed, or retreating. They do not need to wage a protracted battle of attrition. They just strike when disabling one vehicle completely wrecks the enemy operation. Here, that BTR was the weakest link in their assault chain. For the dismounted Russian elements, the tactical reality inverted in seconds. Their armored carrier was burning behind them. Their line of retreat was compromised, and their capacity to fight as an organized unit was completely shattered. A casualty was trapped on the burning deck, triggering absolute panic and showing how fast rescue, transport, and combat collapse into pure chaos. High above, Ukrainian recon UAVs maintained persistent surveillance, tracking every single hostile survivor struggling around that shattered assault position. This left the hostile infantry exposed directly outside our defensive positions. They could no longer rely on that BTR to suppress our defensive fire, screen their movements, or evacuate them if the situation turned terminal. Every single command decision became agonizing. Holding position meant dying under constant surveillance. Retreating meant running through open ground with zero cover. Attempting to regroup only burned time while our units adjusted their fire. That brutal pressure made every second of hesitation lethal, as they fought to survive while our fire teams queued up the next strike. At that exact moment, this ceased to be a mechanized breakthrough. It became a turkey shoot of stranded infantry. The heavy armor meant to spearhead their offensive was gone, leaving the survivors trapped in an increasingly tight, high-lethality meat grinder. This set the stage for the next phase. With their BTR eliminated, the lane cleared for our Bradley to turn their isolation into devastating firepower. With the enemy infantry stranded near our lines, our M2 Bradley stepped up to dictate the coming minutes of the engagement. Let's be clear, this was not a long-range exchange. This was close-quarters slaughter, where every exposed movement meant instant death. The hostile squad had lost their mobile shield, leaving them with absolutely no armor support to lean on. Our Bradley crew identified that tactical window and exploited it before the enemy could fortify their positions. This scenario proves that tempo is just as vital as raw throw weight. A single Bradley does not have to wipe out a regiment solo. It simply has to hit them when they are disoriented, isolated, and cornered, and that is exactly what went down near Beachy. The hostile forces made contact at the perimeter, but they had established zero fire superiority or control. This left them utterly defenseless against our armor. Our primary tool for this counterstrike was the 25mm Bushmaster autocannon. Frontally, it might not crack heavy tanks, but against soft-skinned targets, infantry, and light structures, it is a catastrophic meat grinder. Its high-rate cyclic fire shreds brick walls, door frames, and window sashes, obliterating any light cover that might stop a standard rifle round. In this environment, what looks like a safe house turns into a coffin. This was crucial, as the enemy forces were tightly packed together, not dispersed. They bunched up near doorways and walls right after bailing from the BTR. When our Bradley opened up, those coordinates became absolute death traps. That heavy autocannon fire did more than inflict casualties, it completely shut down their movement. Under that volume of fire, soldiers cannot rotate rooms, cross open courtyards, or regroup. What made this engagement especially brutal was the range. Reports indicate our Bradley engaged them from a distance of roughly 10 meters, which is point-blank range for an armored vehicle. At that proximity, reaction time drops to 0. You might hear the muzzle blast, but the rounds have already impacted. There is absolutely no time to assess the threat vector, find cover, or return fire before the entire position is completely overrun. This is exactly why stripping away their armor support earlier was the decisive blow. These men did not walk into a standard firefight. They had stumbled into a high-intensity, close-quarters nightmare against an armored beast that could hunt, maneuver, and endlessly fire. A single M2 Bradley turned the immediate sector into a deadly kill zone, striking faster than Russian forces could adapt. This engagement underscores the crucial role of Bradley platforms in active defense. They are combat vehicles, but they are not invincible. Mines, FPV drones, and anti-armor weaponry remain persistent threats, but when tactical opportunities arise, a Bradley acts as a devastating mobile fire base. It rapidly shifts position, delivers precision autocannon bursts, and breaks a local assault before it gains traction, providing vital capability in complex urbanized terrain. Russian vanguard units prioritize rushing toward forward structures, using them as staging points to funnel in reinforcing waves. A Bradley allows Ukrainian troops to contest that first foothold instantly. It ruthlessly target locks the vulnerable transition phase, catching exposed infantry on arrival near Berdai before they can consolidate positions. The outcome was a brutal wake-up call. When hostile infantry loses its armored transport near our lines, the danger does not stop at a burning BTR. It actually intensifies as isolation grants Ukrainian armor a brief but highly lethal tactical opening. Our crews capitalized on that opening, turning a failed assault into close-quarters destruction, leaving the next wave heading into a trap. Yet Russian command refused to halt after that initial disaster near Berdichi. They pushed another BTR forward packed with troops, ignoring how quickly this sector turns armored transports into burning wreckage. The vehicle barreled through a known minefield at maximum speed, relying on improvised front plating as if speed alone could shield them. But this approach was no longer an open route. It was now a pre-targeted corridor under heavy drone surveillance. This tactical error doomed the second wave before they even dismounted. The incoming BTR stopped adjacent to the previous wreck, dropping troops directly into coordinates. Ukrainian gunners had already dialed in. The smoking carcass, shattered structures, and open fields now mapped out a perfect, pre-registered kill zone. For operators monitoring the feeds from above, every movement was tracked against the first failed attempt. This gave defensive crews instant visual confirmation on the dismount point, allowing them to concentrate devastating, precision fire. The critical moment arrived as those troops began pouring out of the carrier. At that exact second, they lost their armored shield, but had yet to reach any form of cover. They were fully exposed to direct defensive fires, yet completely unable to form a cohesive counterattack. Heavy 25mm rounds tore in from the front before the squad could disperse, find cover, or establish a foothold. The entire assault rhythm shattered right here. Successful mechanized pushes rely on a fast, disciplined execution sequence. The armor arrives, infantry dismounts, and support units shield them as they sprint for cover near Berdichi. But that chain of events was severed at its weakest link, trapping these troops between transport and combat. Their landing did not generate tactical pressure. It only created high-risk exposure. Overhead, Ukrainian drone assets made the situation worse, tracking every movement and maintaining target lock on the hot zone. A destroyed BTR might conceal a soldier from one direction, and a shattered wall could block horizontal lines of sight, but neither could hide movement from the sky. This engagement shows Russian commanders are repeating predictable patterns that our forces are exploiting. Their infantry dismounts under extreme stress, and our defensive fires pin them down in narrow pockets. The pressure is multidimensional. Reconnaissance drones actively track the entire advance. Bradleys punish the dismount, while other units stand ready to strike any movement. Crucially, Russia is losing far more than just hardware and personnel. They are losing the tight operational timing that mechanized units require to survive. Every hesitation hands our forces another tactical opening, forcing survivors to seek cover near wreckage that our drones monitor constantly. Each incoming vehicle risks entering a sector already shaped by the previous disaster. That is why these repeated pushes near Berdichi matter far beyond a simple combat clip. It illustrates how a failed initial wave zeroed in the target area. Russian command kept feeding BTRs forward, but we had already turned the sector into a pre-registered kill zone. Let us zoom out to the broader situation in Donetsk and Turet, where our troops are relying on more than standoff fire, engaging in brutal, close-quarters combat inside city ruins. In Donetsk, we have proven that the fight is far from over when Russian troops abandon their vehicles or hide in structures. The moment a hostile recon unit slipped behind Ukrainian lines, the tactical picture fractured. Defenders were no longer tracking targets in the open. They faced hostile infantry dug into tight rooms, blind corners, and fatal funnels. Assault teams breach the outer walls with high explosives, then demand immediate surrender from the hostile forces barricaded inside. It is a brutal calculation. Taking prisoners yields vital intel, but entering unsecured rooms is often suicide. Blind spots block feed cameras. Every doorway hides an active threat. A single hallway becomes a kill zone. While the initial hostile combatants surrendered, the second refused to egress the structure immediately. Tensions spiked. Direct comms broke down, leaving both elements with a razor-thin window to negotiate. The captive attempted to talk his comrade down, destabilizing the entire site. This was a chaotic, high-risk engagement, a highly volatile negotiation in close quarters. Then, the entire tactical situation shifted in an instant. At the point of apparent capitulation, the second hostile combatant launched a grenade directly at the breaching team. That hostile action shattered any chance of a peaceful resolution. This is the ultimate nightmare in close-quarters battle. Operators can exercise tactical patience, but self-preservation at zero range always remains the priority. This contact highlights why forces cannot rely on a single doctrine during urban operations. FPV drones scout and strike, while precision fire suppresses the target structure from the exterior. But clearing barricaded shooters requires disciplined small unit tactics and split-second decisions. In urban environments, every building is an isolated war zone. In the Turet sector, we saw a different tactical approach. Rather than storming a hostile strongpoint floor by floor, Ukrainian operators targeted the structural integrity. Operators penetrated the basement levels, rigging TM-62 anti-tank mines with timed fuses, then egressed before detonation. They bypassed the room-to-room grind. The objective was structural demolition. In high-intensity combat, tall buildings present an extreme defensive threat if left intact. They provide elevated cover, overlook key supply corridors, and direct deadly interdiction fire. Frontal assaults up narrow stairwells expose storming elements to devastating fire from above. Timed charges mitigated this risk, bypassing enemy electronic warfare units designed to jam wireless detonators. If you and I study these operations, the strategic takeaway is clear. Kyiv is tailoring tactics to specific targets. For fortified concrete structures, total demolition is the only answer. Across theaters from Donetsk to Turet, this campaign proves urban defense is about more than holding streets. It is a calculated cycle of deciding when to breach, when to strike, and when to level the stronghold. Along the Kramatorsk axis, the fight evolved into an intense test of drone defense. The adversary did not commit minor armored units. They threw relentless waves of main battle tanks and armored carriers, forcing defenders to sustain heavy pressure for hours. The objective was saturation. Flooding the zone would deplete Ukrainian drone reserves, rapidly exhausting their batteries, operators, and reaction times. Hostile crews actively attempted to adapt. Mechanized units deployed steel chains, rubber screens, and improvised cage armor over vulnerable areas. These modifications were designed to counter FPV strikes, preventing incoming shaped charge warheads from finding flat surfaces or detonating on weak points. This tactical detail confirms the adversary fully respected our drone capabilities. However, cage armor only mitigates impact. It cannot negate the massive danger of continuous Ukrainian aerial surveillance and coordinated, layered fires. Kyiv countered with an integrated system, not a single weapon. Airborne recon assets monitored the approaches, pinpointing exactly where the next assault column was forming. FPV units then engaged hostile armor as they slowed, maneuvered, or crossed open, zeroed in terrain. Once hostile crews bailed out of burning hulls, defensive fire shifted onto the dismounted infantry. Heavy cluster munitions and indirect fire tore into troops scrambling for cover outside their shattered vehicles. Direct mechanized fire anchored the defensive line, preventing the enemy columns from transforming the assault into close-quarters combat. Still, this defense is incredibly punishing for Ukraine. Our battle records show you and I just how many drone assets were sacrificed to break this hostile surge. Make no mistake, a successful defensive operation still exacts a massive toll. Drones require replacement, batteries need charging, operators demand relief, and technicians must constantly repair battle-damaged hardware. Russian forces are testing if Ukraine can sustain this brutal defensive tempo from dawn until dusk. Ultimately, the Russian push failed to breach the line. Intel reports confirm 5 brutal assault waves, leaving 9 armored vehicles destroyed and 4 damaged. The data proves that up-armored plating and relentless pressure failed to solve their core tactical breakdown. Once aerial assets spot these targets, they enter a lethal battle space ruled by timing, visibility, and rapid strikes. Chromaturk proves that every hostile armored thrust pays a brutal toll before reaching the Ukrainian forward defensive line. From Berdichi to Twetsk and Chromaturk, this campaign is about more than losing another armored carrier, tank, or assault squad. The critical bottleneck is that Russian advances enter a battle space where every single move is observed, calculated, and crushed before any breakthrough. Recon drones locate the movement. FPV drones strike weak points. Bradley autocannons or heavy artillery pin down exposed infantry, while special forces clear out any hostile survivors entrenched in urban cover. This compresses the tactical response loop, creating a deadly kill chain for every hostile push. Russian commanders will likely deploy small storm groups and modified armor because the pressure to advance remains intense. But without superior reconnaissance, coordinated fire support, and active electronic warfare, this meat grinder will continue. Near Berdichi, Turet, and Kramatorsk, each offensive brings high pressure but yields only catastrophic losses. If this battlefield intel helps you understand the harsh reality faced by frontline soldiers, trapped civilians, and entire war-torn nations, please like and share, and subscribe to Military Force Now. We analyze these battles not to glorify combat, but to understand the brutal cost of war and protect our hard-won peace.